Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
And here we are, once again, Photoshop edition. I am your host, Duck. I want to thank everybody for joining me this evening. Hopefully everybody had a good week since our last episode. We have Bonnie, we have Lehia, we have Brian, Alan, and Jill. And that's it. Hopefully we'll get a few more people that come in. All right, so I just want to mention what's that, Bonnie?
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was not on.
Oh. Okay.
That was my house guest, the current dog that we have.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. So we got a couple things coming up. With Milford Photo, I'm going to be doing Beyond the Rule of Thirds, which is coming up on Tuesday the 24th. All right. You can see it right here. Okay. At 7 o'clock. So if you've never watched this particular session, it goes all into the different types of composition and different ways of looking at an image that you as a photographer should be aware. It's called Beyond the Rule of Thirds simply because the way I see most people when they're learning photography, the rule of thirds is explained to them. You know, the tic-tac-toe grid, and you place your point of interest in one of those four little intersection points, and you're good to go. And then that's it. They never explain to you anything beyond that. Just the rule of thirds, the rule of thirds, the rule of thirds. All right. But there are more compositional rules that goes beyond the rule of thirds. And what's funny is that a lot of beginners will say, you know, oh, I shot this and I broke the rules by not using the rule of thirds. I broke the rules. And I quietly giggle to myself because what they're actually doing is they're just substituting one rule for another rule. There's no rule breaking going on. It's just that they're unaware of the rule that they substituted with. So anyway, it's a great introductory session into the different types of compositional grids that you can use, as well as some of the psychology behind how we as humans interact with visual imagery. The second, man, I started using my voice and I was starting to crack here. The second one is the Monday just before that, because we have an extra Monday this month. What I want to do is on the fourth Monday, I want to offer all my Patreons a special session. It's one I've done a couple of years ago, but because of COVID and everything, I haven't done it in a while. But it's the three-tone guide to composition. It's a great little tool that you can use in your post-processing that helps you identify where your point of interest is based on not, grid compositions, but how your image uses light to draw the attention of the viewer. So we're going to discuss the different ways of using light. Some things to look for when you are creating a composition as far as how you use light on set or out in the field, and then how you can take it to the next level when you do your Photoshop or Lightroom editing, right? And I'm going to talk about a neat little check a check layer that can be used in Photoshop to really, really help you identify visually where your point of interest is as far as the way the light interacts in your image. So anyway, that's going to be on Monday, the 23rd, our regular time, 6:30. And this is offered for my Patreon members. So anyway, so that's what's coming up. All right, before we get into actually, let me pull up where's my, I want to pull up something real quick. I had I am a member of the Professional Photographers Association, and in particular our local chapter here in Connecticut. And I am working on getting my certification as a professional photographer. And part of that is you have to earn certain points through different types of activities. And in particular, one of them is by entering competitions, by attending classes, or by giving classes. All right. So anyway, I entered a competition. It was kind of like a last minute, pull the trigger last minute type of thing for me. And I'm proud to say I won first place in my category, which is commercial. All right. And this is the image that won. So I'm very happy with myself. This is my first award as a photographer that I've ever received. While it's nothing groundbreaking, you know, others have won first prize ribbons for their photography. It's just nice because it's my first. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys.
Congrats, Doc.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Well done.
Yeah. So I shared it. So that piece, this piece here, I actually did for a client. And I shared the news with the client, and they were all thrilled that it won an award, because obviously it's, you know, it's their product. So they're very, very happy. So, and I'm thrilled. Okay, so that's that for that. What we're going to be doing today, fix my camera here. What we're going to be doing today is a bunch of stuff kind of put into a project that I recently did. Aside from being a PPA member, I am also a member of a group of great photographers called Project 52, and we happen to have one of our members here, which is Lihia. And Project 52 is a kind of like a mentoring educational group run by a photographer out of Arizona called Don Giannetti, whom I've had the pleasure of not personally meeting, but you know, coming across a number of years ago, and I loved the way he taught. It was very reminiscent of another photographer that I held in high respect, and I joined his classes, and I joined his group, and we have, you know, a little bit of a close-knit community. One of the other members from Project 52, who happens to be here in Connecticut, reached out to me and said, hey, you know, I'm going to be driving by your way. Do you mind if I stop by and say hello? All right. And I said, oh, by all means, absolutely. You know, so we got to talking on the phone, and this kind of like drive-by hello turned into, let's do something in the studio. All right. Her name is Ling Messer. Let me share her portfolio here. She's up from the northeast corner of Connecticut. and she is a commercial photographer. And you can see she does some awesome work. A lot of, lifestyle photography and product photography that's really got a nice punch to it. All right. I'm almost embarrassed to say I think she's a better photographer than I am, creatively wise, Look at this stuff. That one just screams hot, So anyway, we decided we'd get together and we were going to do, a little food shot. And it's like, well, what do we do? So we knocked around some ideas and we decided that in honor of our mentor from Project 52, who happens to be out in Arizona, who also happens to love tacos, we're going to do a taco themed shoot. So she was kind enough to get a bunch of the parts for the taco, and we set it up. As a matter of fact, I still got this kind of set up from when we shot. A very simple setup, single light overhead, dark background. This is right here. This is the table where we had all the food set up. And we went to town. I haven't seen what she's come up with yet. We kind of, the day she was here, I kind of concentrated on helping her out with her photo shoot. And she basically took all the parts and she's going to work at it at her studio. And then what I did is, when I had some free time, I shot, my version of it using the same ingredients and the same concept. I shot it here and I put it together. And what I want to do is I want to kind of walk through the whole process of the of building this composite image. Okay, so what did we have in mind? Well, we definitely wanted a taco. And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to work out some kind of concept drawing. All right. Me personally, when I'm working on something that's a little complex, I like to kind of sketch it out ahead of time. So that way, when it comes time to photograph it, I kind of know where all the pieces are going to go. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate drawing. And you can see, well, hopefully you guys can see, this is the drawing that I did. And the concept is that we're going to have a plate and the taco's going to be kind of flying off the plate up into the upper corner of the frame. Okay. That's the concept. All right. So as we're talking about it, as and this was kind of like a short notice. One of the things that I said, wish we could get something to put into the image that kind of represents, our mentor, Don. And I said, wouldn't it be great if I could find like a ceramic cactus, one of those saguaro cactuses that look like this? And I said, well, the chances of me finding a cactus like that are going to be zilch to none. But I decided I'm just going to try. I went to our local Goodwill store, and lo and behold, let me grab it. Lo and behold, on their little tchotchke shelf, I found this. So,
for real.
Yeah.
That's tremendous.
Sadly, we were so wrapped up in Ling's photo shoot that we forgot to photograph this for her. All right. So unfortunately, she didn't get a shot of this. So we'll see if she does anything on her own. If not, I'll probably take a shot of this and send it to her. So anyway, what I want to do is I've already done the work. All right. I've already put the image together. All right. And so you're going to see the finished piece. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down all the different pieces. All right. And then throughout the explanation, I'm going to stop and demonstrate how I did certain things. All right. So I'll undo parts just to redo it. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and okay, where am I? Share screen, screen 3, share. Okay, everybody seeing my my big screen? Me? Okay. Switch over to the desktop. Okay. All right. Let me. Why is this? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Why is this not? There we go. Okay. That's not going to work. Let me switch over this way. That'll work. Hopefully that'll work. Okay. So this is the image. Okay. So you can see all the elements from the concept sketch are there, and actually like I said, we added the little cactus, and I also added a fork. That was definitely a last minute thing that we decided to do when we worked on Ling's image, you know, to kind of like include a fork, which kind of made sense, you know. But the challenge here is to, you know, I call it the flying taco. All right, so have all the stuff just kind of like blah, out of the taco, where you can see all the different layers that creates the taco. All right, so if you look closely, you can see, you know, the layer of chicken, the layer of lettuce, the layer of salsa, the layer of cheese, and then the layer of sauce. All right, it's all very clearly defined. So that way we can, you know, we all know what a taco looks like. We've all eaten tacos, and we know that's how we build it. All right. It's just here we're presenting it in a way that we normally don't see a taco. Right. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I like to do when working on a big project is I like to do a quick little research online in Google Images to see what how others have solved the particular problem. And I didn't see too many of these types of images where it's a taco just, you know, exploded out. So, and that's kind of nice. All right, so the first thing we did is, you know, we set up our stage, which is, all right, which is basically just a small little tabletop, okay? And for Ling's image, she didn't want anything on this. This is a textured tabletop. She kind of liked that textured tabletop with the dark imagery, and she actually picked a plate that was black, and it had this kind of like textured design to it. All right, so she went with the more muted, darker colors. All right, whereas I went with something that had a little tablecloth on it, a little bit more festive, and a brighter plate, which you see here. All right, so you can see it's a yellow tablecloth, and the plate was actually suspended above the table at that crazy angle, and then the supports were just removed out in Photoshop. Okay. Once I had my base plate, okay, by composition, in camera, the lighting properly lit, okay, the camera gets locked and it doesn't move from that position, okay. And what I'll do is I'll then manipulate each individual layer on its own within that scene. All right. So for this particular scene, what I did is I put down the tablecloth and I put the plate in place and I photographed that, kind of get a sense of, how the angle of the light played. All right. Actually, let me go ahead and switch over to Lightroom, and I will show you all the images that were taken. Okay. So the first image. Oh, that's not the first image. The first image. There we go. The first image, I'm just getting the view from the camera, all right, kind of positioned. I knew that I wanted to be up close and personal with the food, and then the next step is just to get my lighting correct, okay, and that's my lighting. So what you're seeing here is I have an arm for my C-stand that's holding a base plate, a flat surface that has a rubber grippy kind of like silicone surface to it, that allows me to put stuff without it sliding off too easily. All right, so that's holding the plate. Right next to that, I have a DIY focusing target. This allows me to focus with the camera while there's nothing in my scene. Obviously, if there's nothing there, the camera won't be able to focus. So I got to place something there temporarily. Okay. And then this arm here, you'll see in a moment, this is actually going to hold the shell of the taco. Okay. So couple of shots just to get my lighting set. Once I was happy with the lighting, and you can see that my whites are not blown out, the highlights on the plate are not blown out, okay, and we have a nice dark background. Okay, now in my particular concept, I wanted to put that spot of color right behind everything. Now, I could have done this in camera with a light and a colored gel on some kind of background surface. But the problem is, from experience, I know that when I start making the food fly up in the air, it's never ever going to be in the right place at the right time where I can just clip it out and drop it straight into the scene. Oftentimes it needs to be shifted left to right, up or down, or even rotated, right? So having that black background allows me to remove the background and drop in my own in post-production, and that's what I opted to do. Okay. All right, so now we have our setup. The first thing I do is I took kind of like a clean plate with just the plate and the tabletop and nothing else. All right. And this can be used as my kind of like the initial image. All right. And this is what everything else would be built on. All right. And then I go ahead and I introduced the taco shell. And you can see I'm just holding it with a little alligator clip. And it's a matter of finding the position. Okay. So you can see, all right, one of the things that you need to avoid when it comes to photography is what are called tangents. Right? And you can see there's a tangent here where the tip of the shell is just barely breaking the edge of that plate. All right? So this right here is a big no-no. All right? Because it makes it look sloppy. It makes it look like you don't care. All right? It's also a big no-no in illustration. So what you need to do is just move your subject so that the silhouette that's created is a little bit more decisive. All right. So you can see here that we have, you know, the silhouette just kind of breaks away, and there's enough overlap here. All right, that there's no question about the intent that is going on here. Okay. All right. The other thing you're going to notice is right up here, I have a screen. Okay. And one of the things that I noticed is that in this particular image, the plate in relation to the shell was very overbearing. All right. So I says, I you know, as much as the light is nice, it's a little bit too much on the plate, but it's perfect for everything else because it's the proper exposure for everything else that's going into the scene. So what I did is I have a little screen that I can use and maneuver over very specific parts of my image in order to knock down the light just a little bit without really casting a shadow. All right, and that's what this screen does. Okay, you can see the difference between the screen and no screen. Okay, and then of course I didn't like the position of the shell. I kept moving it around. I kind of like that one, so I took one with the screen, and it created this really weird light thing on the plate. I wasn't very happy, so I took another shot. All right, and I ended up not even using those. I used you know, my initial shot. Okay, and one of the earlier shots of the taco shell. I think I used this one. All right. And I just repositioned it. Okay. All right. Here we go. Then I introduced the little cactus. All right. Because I almost forgot. All right. Because it's sitting across the other side of the room. So I went and grabbed it. I put it in place. I put it there. It seemed a little bit off, so I moved it. I go, oh no, that's way too much into the corner. Brought it back, moved the plate holder out of the way, and took a blank shot of this. Okay. So again, this could be used as a base plate to work off of. All right. So because everything's blank, I can go ahead and build everything up on there. Okay. All right. Now it's time to get the food flying. So I built a little not a trampoline, like a little diving board rig. made out of plexiglass, and it's being held in place by my C-stand. All right. And this is just me testing it to see how it works. And it's really, actually, let me grab. It's nothing more than a piece of plexiglass, and I'm clamping one end, and I'm doing this to the product. All right, I load it up, I do this, and it flings it up in the air, and we're good to go. Oops.
I didn't see that.
Oh, no, you didn't. Let me do that again.
There you go, much better.
I always forget to switch. All right, so it's a piece of plexiglass. I clamp it in the, I clamp it right here, all right, to hold it in place, all right. So once it's held in place, I just load up the food onto here, and all I got to do is do this, and it sends it flying, all right. Of course, if you're going to do that, you're going to need a shutter release cord, all right, and I suggest wired shutter. Okay, back to the desktop. I suggest getting a wired shutter. Don't get the infrared one where you got to kind of stand in front. Doesn't work. And definitely don't use the mobile app because there's a delay. All right. A worst case scenario, you can press the shutter button, but because everything is locked on that tripod, you don't want to be moving that camera. So if you can avoid touching it, all the better. All right, I was shooting tethered, so I could also trip the shutter right here from the computer through Lightroom. Okay, so anyway, so this image here is just me doing this to the diving board and giving it a test. All right. So once I felt confident, I went and loaded it up with chicken, which is the first layer. All right. And I just did several several variations of it. All right. And as a lot of this is experimental, because you really don't know how the food is going to react being tossed up in the air like this. Different weights, different consistencies. All right, you'll notice when we get later into the salsas, things tend to clump together. Things tend to stick to that little diving board. So it's a lot of experimentation. It's also experimentation on how much force in order to send it up. And of course, it's a lot of, being quick on that trigger as you're sending the food flying. All right. So we got quite a few, not a lot. Every time I tripped the shutter and took a shot, I would review it to see what I got. I was pretty happy with what I got. So I felt, just those few shots, I had enough to work with. Okay. Then we go into the salad, which is the next layer. All right. And you'll see how this is now a lot more messy. This first one was a complete failure. You can see it went just all over the place. And each subsequent one became a little bit better. All right. But here's an example of I moved the clump further back up the I pushed the product further back onto that little diving board, and it sent it up in a big clump rather than spraying it all over the place, which happened to the previous shot because it's closer to the end. So again, a lot of experimentation. Then, I kind of did this one because I didn't want it in a clump. I wanted some kind of scatter, all right, but not as much as that first one. So, and then this one I was definitely very happy with, all right. Not so happy with this one. And this one was pretty cool too, All right. So I felt I had enough material here. All right. You don't need to go excessively crazy, with this, because you are working with things created by chance. All right. And that's part of the flavor of your composition, is getting this spontaneous, assemblage of products. Okay. Then came the salsa. All right. I shifted over because in my mind, the salsa went further over to the corner, but I realized that it was too much in the corner. But here's a great example of how it clumped up in really, really funky ways. I put in a little bit less on it and it went a little bit better. That one, I took the shot too soon. A little bit better. All right. And there we go. So that one was a little trickier, a lot more clumpy. So it took me more effort to get suitable images. All right. But once I was happy, I cleaned everything up and it was time to go for the cheese. The cheese. There we go. Again, I'm too far in the corner. You'll see that I shifted everything back. But notice how everything was spread out on that board, and when I flung it up, that whole clump of cheese went up in one group. Okay. A little bit more of a spread, Here it is. I shifted everything. I love the way this came out. It's still fairly clumpy, but yet spaced out enough to look like it's been tossed up in the air. And then this one, and then this. This one here, I dropped it, as well as this one. I just kind of dropped it, and I did not like the effect of those, so I didn't pursue it any further beyond these two tests. Okay. The last one was a little bit tricky. How do you get the sauce to look like it's flying? All right. So one of the ways is to apply it to something that's transparent enough. So again, the clear plexiglass, I gave it this blobby shape, like it's kind of like squirting out. And I just did a couple of variations. The one by itself looked kind of icky, so I added a couple more smaller meteorites to it, and it seemed to kind of like balance it. All right. And if you notice, there's three. It's the rule of thirds, which you'll learn about in my composition session with Milford Photo. All right. So I did a few variations of those, holding it at different angles just to play around with. All right. And you'll see how they get used. Okay. And then the last thing was the fork. All right. And I just put it on my ever handy alligator clip, and I just took a bunch of images, and it kept falling off. I tried dropping it. It didn't work. So I finally just, got it to kind of sort of hang on there. It was a little shaky, but I got a variety of images, and that's the final result. Okay. Any questions about the shooting process? No?
Yeah, I have a question. Where did you get the alligator clip?
The alligator clip I bought. I bought those years ago. There used to be a great store. There used to be a great store years ago that you can buy all kinds of nifty little things like that, and that was called Radio Shack. And unfortunately, Radio Shack went under, so it's like, oh, where do I get my supplies now? And there used to be a store here called Sears Hardware. Sears Hardware. And they had a whole section of just random parts. You know,
It's called Amazon.
what's that?
It's Amazon.
Yeah, it's Amazon now.
And basically they're roach clips.
They are. They're roach. Yeah.
So they're roach clips. So I mean, and they're used for electronics. They're used for photos. They're used for all kinds of stuff. But I got mine from Amazon and a couple of stands to go along with it for some real macro stuff.
Oh yeah. I actually, I just bought. You might be interested in this, Alan. They sell. I don't know if you've ever watched like claymation animation in progress, where they use this rig to kind of hold the puppets in place. You ever see that?
Yes.
They kind of look like the little helping hands for the soldering. All right, where it's got the articulated arms and then it's got the little alligator clips on it. Well,
that's why I picked up.
yeah, they're great. But the thing with the ones for soldering is that they got the two arms, and it's kind of bulky, and the arms are short. So I actually bought the animator ones. They were a little bit pricier. They're like $27 for a simple armature, and I bought 3 of them. But the arms are longer. When I get them in, remind me to show it to you. I think you might be interested. All right.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, the alligator clips I was able to pick up at Sears Hardware. Sears Hardware is no longer, but I have seen them at craft stores like Joann Fabrics. You can find them there. And of course, nowadays you can find anything on Amazon. The only thing, me personally, I like, there are times where I just want to shop local for something because, buying clips, you got to buy them in bulk if you're going to buy a mail order. And usually the shipping is more than the product itself, so unless I'm buying something with a bunch of other stuff, it just doesn't make sense. So I like shopping local. But hobby stores will have them. Lowe's and Home Depot, I don't think I've ever seen alligator clips there, but they probably do have them. But anyway.
Is that the name? I can say, so do you have alligator clips and they will know?
Yeah. Let me, So I actually, give me a second. I actually have 2 kinds of clips. All right. So, oops, dropping everything. So what I did is I at Michael's, which is an art supply store, I got wire that's used for armature and clay sculpting. It's called armature wire, and it's very bendy and flexible. All right, it can't hold a lot of weight. All right, but for light stuff, it's pretty good. All right, and this is the alligator clip. All right, and this particular alligator clip came with these little tabs that you can bend over to attach to wire. And I just inserted the wire, pinched it shut. All right, and it's about 1 foot long. And the nice thing is I can take this and bend it and set it on my table to hold, things. All right. Such as my little target. All right. And this is a different type of clip. This, I don't know the name of this type of clip. but I found this in the electrical section, and it's basically for making electrical connections, temporary electrical connections. All right, so it's got these very wide jaws. All right, so sometimes I'll use this in the event that the alligator clips don't work. All right, this is for a little fine stuff. This is a little bit more heavy duty. Okay. All right. All right, so let me now. Any other questions on the shooting aspect of this image, the photography aspect? It's pretty straightforward. All right. So the key to this is, to photograph each layer individually in order to be able to manipulate it to its best potential in post. Okay. All right. So this is what my image looks like, and you can see each one of these groups of layers is identified. I have my fork, I have my sauce, my cheese, the salsa, the lettuce, the chicken and the shell. The reason they're together is because the two interact with each other. I have my plate, and then I have my background. All right. So now I can go ahead and I can turn these off individually to hide each layer. And you can see how all my layers are created. Okay. All right. So let's start with the bottommost layer. I'm going to sit down for this if you don't mind. Okay. So the bottommost layer is I used this, all right, with the I used this. It's the one with the plate over the table by itself and nothing else in its place. All right. And the first thing that I did was I created a mask to mask out the plate and the tabletop. All right. Because my original thought was I was going to just keep the two together. Okay. But I quickly realized that if I keep the two together on the same layer, it became a little awkward. So what I did is I duplicated it, and I masked one for the plate and one for the tabletop, and kept the two separate. So this one is just for the tabletop. Okay. And you can see that that's all it is. All right. But there is the shadow. The shadow still remains because remember, the original had the plate. My plate was still here. Okay. So I still have the shadow, which is fine. All right. Because the shadow is going to be used. Okay. So I removed the background and I created a color fill layer. All right. Color fill. And the reason hey, what's going on here? Why is this binging on me? Oh, it's because it's locked. That's why. Come on. Come on. There we go. All right. With my color fill, what is going on here? Why is this binging at me? Oh, for God's sakes. Oh, here we go. It was off screen, that's why. Okay, so with a color fill layer, all right, I can choose any color that I want. Okay, rather than painting in a color spot behind it, I decided I was gonna just use a fill, color fill, which allows me to, like I said, pick whatever color I want anytime, anywhere. All right. And what I did is I went with a kind of like a reddish color. I was thinking originally of going with, like a yellow color. But I thought that might be a little bit too much of a clash with the table, or with the tabletop. So I decided to go with, kind of this more of an orangey reddish color. All right. So definitely a Southwest feel for the color. Right. And what I did is I just went really, really dark. Okay. Because I wanted to play with that dark background. Okay. So on screen, it actually looks black. It isn't black, but it looks black. Okay. Why is this not? Okay. And then above that, in order to create that little spot of light, what I did is I created a curves adjustment layer. Okay. And I brought my white point to the middle. So that middle gray point, 128. And in the mask, all right, let me show the mask. All I did was I painted a gradient. So what I did is I took the ellipse tool. I created an ellipse. All right. I filled it with white, and then I just blurred it. Okay. And when I blurred it, it created this nice gradient. All right. And of course, everything that is black hides the effect. Everything that's white allows that effect to punch through. And the effect, of course, is to make things brighter. So when it's applied on that background, it just allows that little background color it brightens up that background color, revealing some of that red. Okay. And then the last thing I noticed is the arm that was holding the plate was also casting a shadow right down here in the corner. All right, you can see it's casting a shadow. So what I did is I put in a dodge and burn layer above it in order to get rid of that shadow. That's all that does. You can see shadow. I dodged it, make it a little bit brighter. Okay. All right. Then, of course, couldn't forget my cactus. I dropped my cactus in. All I did there was I created a mask for it. And I also, you can see how the mask kind of goes off the edge there. That's for the shadow being cast by the cactus. All right. So there's a little bit of a shadow interplayed right down in this area. So I kept that. And then I used a curves adjustment just to kind of give a little bit of contrast and burn the shadow parts a little bit so that they stand out. Okay. And that's all that is. Any questions on my background? Pretty straightforward, I think, right? All right. Next part was my plate. All right. And if you remember the plate, the plate was on the arm. So all I did was again, it was that initial plate, that layer. I just masked out the everything else, and I kept just the plate hovering above. Okay. And it's in place. And of course we have the shadow interplay. All right. I also decided to give it a little bit of contrast on it with a curves adjustment. Okay, you're going to see a lot of curves adjustments for doing the final tweaks. Okay, it just gives it a little bit of oomph. Okay, the last thing I did, which I'm going to show you here, all right, what I want you to do is I want you to look at this section right here. I didn't notice it until the very end. It looked kind of weird because when the taco shell was in place, it wasn't casting a shadow, all right? So I added a shadow, okay? And you'll see it come into play. Now, the funny thing is, when I took a photo of the taco shell in place with the plate, it wasn't casting a shadow at that time, all right? There is no shadow. As a matter of fact, I had to add that shadow because without it, it looked fake, even though the original didn't have it. All right. So there's a situation where, you know, and I'll see if I can show it to you later. Okay. Remind me. All right. Then it's time for putting everything in. All right. So I grabbed my taco layer, or the taco shell layer, I should say. All right. And this is what it looked like. Okay. And you can see I chose the one that was kind of just bumping in the wrong place. All right. But because I'm just using the taco shell, I knew that I can put it wherever I want. And you can see that it's not in line with the plate. All right. The original plate is not in line with my plate. All right. Because once I got rid of, once I masked everything out, I was able to position that in place. Okay. Who just came in? Alan, the other Alan. Welcome. Okay. All right. So my taco shell is in place. It's now time to build everything up. All right. And my original concept was to have everything kind of like in layers flying off in this direction. All right. So I already knew that coming into this composition. Okay. So time to put the chicken in. All right. And if you notice, all right, what I did is I took all three. Let me go to Lightroom. All right. So I went over to my chicken and I said, all right, I looked at all the different plates with the chicken and I said, well, this one here, that's no good. All right. So I'm not going to use that. Okay. And it was kind of like a combination of these. I kind of like the way the angle was on this one. All right. And the way everything's in a row. It kind of, I could picture it sitting in the taco shell. All right. So that's why I chose that one. All right. And I also chose this one. And I chose this one as my three pieces. Okay. So basically I just grabbed those, all three. I then export it. Right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Open as layers. All right. So what you can do if you want, you can go into the develop module. If you need to change anything, you can see I added some texture to bring the texture of the chicken out a little bit. I added some clarity. All right. And I think that was it. All right. Just to bring some of that texture forward. All right. So I then right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop, which it does exactly what it says. It opens up each part, each one of those images as a separate layer into a single document. All right, the reason I do this is just out of convenience. So I don't have 3 separate files open, all right? So at this point, I said, I grabbed my lasso tool, all right? Grab my lasso tool, and I do oh, what the heck's going on? My mouse is like really misbehaving today. Wow. This is, all right, something new. Something new always has to go, right? Something new always has to go. All right. I don't know what's going on. Basically what I did is I drew a lasso around it, all right, and I duplicated my layer with Control J, Control plus J. All right, for you Mac people, it's I believe it's Command plus J. Okay, and it puts it into its own layer. All right, just the chicken, which is all I needed. Okay, so here we go. Just the chicken. All right, let me make a copy of that. All right, and I'm going to remove my. I'm going to delete the mask. Wow, what is going on here? Photoshop's misbehaving today. Delete. There we go. Okay. Just for simplicity, I'm going to drop a solid color layer. What is going on? I wonder if it's the sharing. That's okay. All right. There we go. What is going on here? Wow. All right. My computer is doing some funky stuff. And I thought, the new computer was supposed to get rid of all this frustration. I'm all frustrated again. All right. So you can see I just, I don't know why it's not getting rid of these. Give me 1 second. Let me see if. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I wonder if I'm going to see if that's, no, that's not fixing anything either. Oh, my UI is hanging up. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, here we go. I'll go. Oh, it's still sharing, right? Yeah, it's still sharing. Yes.
Yeah, it's still sharing.
Okay. Oh, I thought I turned it off. It didn't turn off. Okay. So you can see where I clipped it out from the original image, simply because I don't need all that extra stuff, right? So now from here, I can just go ahead and remove that background black. So I'm using the little magic wand tool. I click on the black part, and you can see because you know, the brightness of the subject against the black makes it very, very easy to trace that that outline, and I can then create a mask. Okay, just as simple as that. Okay. All right, let me get rid of those two. All right. So what I needed to do is I needed some of the chicken to look like it's peeking out from the front part of this shell. All right, because you know the shell is you know U-shaped. Okay, so I wanted the chicken inside the shell. All right, but because we're working in layers, all right, we're not, you know, we need to show it so that parts of the chicken are peeking out from that silhouette of the shell. So originally I was going to just mask out all this area. And the reason I didn't do it is because if I need to make, you know, minor adjustments on that chicken, if I needed to move it, all right, that mask is going to travel along with the chicken, all right? And I need that mask to kind of stay with the shell. So what I end up doing is I duplicated my shell and I placed it on the very top part of the stack. You can see it right here, all right? And I masked out the back part. All this back part of the shell, I masked that out, so all you're seeing is the front part of that shell. So now I can take that chicken and move it around, all right, and it's still going to be behind that front part of the shell, okay? So it just gives me that little bit of flexibility to move stuff without really breaking the concept here, as you can say. Okay, and that's all I did is I just went in and I masked out all the little bits of chicken, and because I clipped very closely around it, you can see that my bounding box, this little bounding box, is just to the chicken. All right, had I brought over, actually, here, let me do it like this, okay? If I were to bring, I need this chicken. If I were to bring this whole layer over, okay, and drop it in, okay, and I were to just mask out this little bit of chicken, all right, you can see where my bounding box is. All right. So if I need to move that little bit of chicken, all right, if I were to try to select something else, that layer is going to interfere. So I opted to just, see, my thing's still not working. So I opted to just cut out very close, remove everything else, and make life easier. Okay, makes sense? All right, so I have 1, 2, 3 pieces of chicken. Okay, now when you're working on a complex composition, it's important to keep track of your stack order. All right, and get into the practice of creating labels, because the one thing you don't want is a completely open stack, and then now if you need to find something, you got to go line by line, item by item, layer by layer, trying to find that one, thing that you need to manipulate that is somewhere unlabeled with a generic layer number 3. Okay, so you can see everything's labeled chicken. I then grouped them all together. And the reason I group it all together is because now on top of that, I can have an adjustment layer that targets all 3 of those pieces, all right? If they weren't grouped together and I needed to, let's say, brighten it up, I would need to put a adjustment layer on each one of these 3 layers, which doesn't make any sense, all right? So I grouped it together, and right above that, I made a hue and saturation layer, and all I did is I warmed it up, all right? I added a little bit of brightness to my yellows and made the yellows a little bit more saturated. So in essence, I made that brown color stand out a little bit more, okay? And if we zoom in here, okay, you can see it's very subtle, all right, but it brightens it up just a little bit, opens up the shadows just a little bit, and makes it a little bit browner, all right? And then I put a curves adjustment with a kind of like a little bit of an S curve, and all this does is it gives it a little bit of local contrast, all right? So this, you can see that I brightened up the brights a little bit while keeping the shadow about the same, all right? All it does is it gives it a little bit of punch, okay? Any questions on the chicken shell? All right, the rest goes the same exact way, all right? I added my next layer, which is my lettuce. I went, excuse me, I went to Lightroom, grabbed the pieces that I wanted. I clipped them out. I brought it in to here. All right, and, oh, wrong one. My lettuce, and I used 2 pieces. There's one. Okay, and there's the other. All right. Clipped them out, removed the black background, rotated them into place, grouped it together, and then I applied a hue saturation layer on this. And what I did is I just punched up the greens just a tiny little bit. I don't know if you can see it. I think you can probably see it in this one the most. All right, a little bit of punch to the yellows and the reds. I made the reds on the carrots look a little bit more orangey than kind of like a dry red. So very tiny, subtle changes. And I'm not sure if it's coming across on the video here for you guys. All right. And next layer, same exact thing. We repeat the same exact process. All right. We take the pieces that we want. In this case, I picked a lot of little pieces. A little clump here, little clump there, little clump there, little clump there. I love this little kind of like C shape. That was definitely going at the end of my spray of salsa. All right. So once they're all arranged the way I want, I click select first and last, group them into a folder. All right. Called it salsa. And again, another hue saturation layer on that. You can see all I did was I brightened up that red. All right. I punched up that red, made it look a little bit more vibrant. Okay. All right. Same thing with the cheese layer. Okay. Cheese layer, same exact thing. This one though, I was able to just use one frame that I took. I kind of like the way this frame was just kind of like all over the place. All right. And what you'll notice, let's see if I can zoom in here. All right. I kind of left this like this for a reason. All right. you notice that there's a bit of a black halo around the cheese. All right. I don't know if you can notice it here. You can notice it against the red here. See the black line? You can definitely notice it here in this area. Okay. And actually there's a section here that I didn't even block out, but you really can't notice it. Okay. All right. That happens on every single layer that I've shown you. All right. The only reason it's not noticeable in the lower layers is because I've removed it. All right. So I want to show you how you can remove that little bit of that dark fringing. Okay. So I did the initial clipping out. Okay. And you can see this is my mask. Okay. And you can see that it's pretty rough. All right. Because I haven't done anything to this particular mask. All right. And that's why it's looking rather shabby in places, and you're seeing that black halo. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that halo. One way to do it is you got to make sure, all right, make sure that your mask is selected, not the layer, but the mask. All right. You can see that little white corners. Okay. And you can come here if you have your properties panel out. You can come here where it says select and mask. Select and mask. My preferred preference is just double click on the mask. All right. And it's going to open up the masking dialog box. Okay. Now, some of you are familiar with this. All right. I have it set up so that you can very clearly see my mask. All right. And the reason is because I have this god-awful green color selected. All right. By default, I think it's red color. Some people will change it to a blue color. All right. I wanted something that contrasted really, really heavily against everything. So I chose this lime green. All right. And the other thing is on my view option, I have it so that the overlay is selected, my overlay. Okay. All right. So what we need to do is, we can use the tools here to kind of refine our mask. All right. If we want to, we can use our lasso tool from here. Okay. And my lasso tool is still not working. I don't know what's going on here. All right. But you can use your lasso tool. All these little sections here that are still left black. Okay. I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but what I want to do is get rid of this halo. Okay. And for that, we need this area down here where it says edge detection. All right. And the global refinements. Actually, I don't think we need the edge detection. We're going to go global refinements. All right. And you have 4 sliders: smooth, feather, all right, smooth, feather, contrast, and shift edge. All right. You're going to notice that when I use the smooth slider, it's going to take a lot of those irregular bumps that are on the outside and it's going to start smoothing out. Okay. You can see now everything's really, really smooth. The only downside to this that I find is in the cusps of any angles whether it's like in here where the cheese is kind of creating these angles here. See how it's all rounded over? That's the only problem I find with using that smooth tool, all right? It's not very good at smoothing out and keeping it within those tight corners, okay? So I might use it until I start just seeing a little bit of that round over, and that's about it, okay? But the ones that really come into effect is the ones below that, okay? You have feather, contrast, and shift edge, right? Feathering, all it does is it basically creates a transition on the mask from black to white, all right? And of course, if you have a hard transition, it makes a very sharp definition to your mask. If you give it a little bit of feathering, it goes through the transition of grays, from black through grays to white, and it kind of smooths out that transition, and it makes it look less like a sticker and more like a natural transition from one to the other, okay? The contrast will take that feathered edge, and by adding contrast, it kind of squishes that transition towards that center part, all right? I'll see if I can explain to you visually, okay? And then the shift edge will shift your edge to the outside of your mask or towards the inside of your mask, all right? And that's what we're going to use to get rid of that halo, all right? But if I move that shift edge, all right, I have it all the way, all right? It does, but you can see that it's very choppy looking, all right? So whenever you do any kind of shift edge, I suggest applying a feather, okay? Applying a feather, all right? How much of a feather is very dependent on what the application is for your mask. In this case, I want the edges to be relatively sharp. So I'm going to use a very, very small amount of feathering. I'm actually going to use 2 pixels, all right, worth of feathering, okay? And you can see how it really just softened that transition, okay? However, the halo's still there. We're going to get rid of that in a second, okay? So we feathered it, all right? But because I want a sharp edge, all right, I'm going to add contrast to my feathering, all right? And I usually, by default, I go about anywhere between 25 and 50%, all right? And that sharpens up that edge, all right? So you want it sharp without that stair stepping, okay? All right, so here it is. We're about 20%, 25%. That looks pretty good, but we still got our halo, okay? So now it's time to shift it in, okay? And I'm just going to shift it until that edge disappears, okay? And that looks pretty good. I can go a little bit more, maybe 70%. And overall, that's looking awesome. Now, mind you, there are a bunch of holidays, but I'm against an already dark background, so it's not going to make that big a deal, all right? If it was a big deal, like I said, I'd go in and I would clean up my mask a little bit more, okay? But for now, this looks pretty good for my needs. I'm only concerned about those areas that overlap the salsa behind it, okay? So you can see right here, all right? Because it's against that little bit of green of the salsa, that black edge was very prominent, all right? So this gets rid of that black edge and just blends everything together, okay? Once you're happy with it, you say okay, and we're back, and see, no more black halo. Make sense? Any questions on that? Okay. And of course, like I said, if you need to, at this point, depending on what it's used for, all right, I'm not going to go super crazy, all right? You can see, like, for example, this, oops, where am I? This square right here, or this triangle, that's not cut out. That's actually part of the cheese layer. But because it matches my background, this is my background here, you can't tell. All right, that's why I'm not going to spend extra time, okay? If you look around and you say, oh, well, there's this one piece like here, all right? Here, we can definitely see that the black is hiding the lower layer, okay? So at this point, I can just take a brush. I'm going to use a hard edge, but hard edge about 80%. All right. Okay, I'm going to make my brush small enough. I want to make sure that I am on my layer mask for my cheese. Okay, your cheese layer, mask layer. Okay. And I want to make sure that white is, black is my foreground color, all right? Because I'm going to go ahead. Wow, what is going on with this? I got a feeling something's stuck on my keyboard. Oh, that is weird. All right. Yeah, that's bizarre. All right. But basically you can go ahead and yeah, that's my computer's broken. All right. You would just use your brush tool and just take that and clean up your mask. This is frustrating. Everything was working beautifully. I get in front of a group of people to explain how to do things, and my computer decides to go haywire. It's me. It's me.
That's the rule. That's the rule.
Yeah.
You know that?
But I thought I got rid of this when I bought. But I thought when I got the new computer, it would fix all this. No, new problems.
That's a myth.
New problems come up. All right, but you get the gist. You know how to use the mask, right?
Yeah.
All right. Let me back out. All right. So that's the cheese layer. That's how you get rid of halos. All right. Without having to go too crazy with brush work. All right. So the cheese layer is done. I put a curves adjustment, to kind of knock down a little bit of the brightness. All right, oops, a little bit of the brightness. As I got higher in my flipping, it went closer to the light. So this was a little bit too bright in relation to everything else. All right. So you can see how very bright that is. So I just wanted to tone it down just a little bit, not much, with a curves adjustment layer. Okay. Next was the sauce. All right. And the sauce, it literally the same exact way. All right. Same exact way. And all I did was I took, you can see my mask there. All right. Nothing overly crazy. I used the magic wand tool to do the heavy lifting for me. All right. And all I did was I masked out that little bit of plexiglass. I actually, when I trimmed it out, I went very close to here with my lasso tool in order to bring it into this layer, all right? So my little plexiglass isn't even showing, all right? However, you'll notice that a funny thing happened, excuse me, from the plexiglass. Because light transmits through plexiglass in a very weird way, all right? There are two surfaces to glass or anything, you know, translucent, all right? There's the front side and the back side of the plexi, all right? So when light travels through, it goes through one layer, bounces around in that middle part of the glass or the plexiglass before coming out the second layer, all right? So what happens is light will propagate. Let's say this is my plexiglass, right? Light will propagate along that layer, all right? And what we're getting is an internal illumination from that refracted light on the underside. Well, actually, it's on the back side of my glob of sauce. So what happened is it put this really bizarre, bright spot on the bottom part of my sauce, which makes it look odd because the light is actually coming from the top. All right, so it looks like there's two light sources, which in reality there were. It was unexpected because of the light propagation. So I needed to get rid of that. So I used the magic wand tool to do the heavy lifting. And then with a small brush, I just went in very carefully and I masked out all that little highlight stuff. All right. And that's what I got. Okay. Very simple. Again, very simple techniques. You know, these are all techniques that you guys already know. It's just using them in a creative way. All right. Once I had everything in place, it was just a matter of kind of arranging the parts a little bit, shifting the angle a little bit. I scaled it down just a tiny little bit. So because my sauce ended up being like right in the corner. All right. And then the last thing I did was I put my fork in the scene. All right. So now when I photographed my fork, let me go to Lightroom. When I photographed my fork, I had already moved the tablecloth. All right. This fork thing was a last resort. Okay. Actually, you can see the little pieces of blue tape. Those are just my kind of like visual cues for where my composition is. All right. So this piece of tape is where my plate was. This piece of tape is where the edge of my taco was. All right. This piece of tape represents where the majority of the stuff was going to go. And then there's another one just off here and just off here that represents my frame. Okay. So anyway, played around with different compositions of the fork. I settled on this one. So all I did, again, brought it into Photoshop by just, you know, I made a lasso around it to put it onto its own layer, and I just brought the fork by itself. All right, now you'll notice that on the ground there is no shadow from that fork. Okay, no shadow. So when I placed it into my scene initially, all right, we have this strong shadow from the plate, And we have this kind of like very subtle shadow from the cactus, but nothing from the fork and nothing from the food. Now remember, everything's being lit from the top, so there should be some kind of shadow. Why is this? What is going on here? There we go. Yeah, something's going on with my, it's not picking up. It's not picking up on these cues. All right. So there's no shadows from any of the food. There's no shadows from the fork. So I knew I would have to put something there in order to kind of like ground everything, even though it's up in the air. Okay. So what I did is I created, with the lasso tool, I created kind of like this long shape on the bottom, long shape, and filled it with black, and then applied a Gaussian blur to it to kind of blur it out, okay? And I took the eraser tool and I started erasing from the far right here. I started erasing into it to kind of make it look like it's fading off, okay? The other way you can do it, you grab a gradient and go from black to transparent and apply the gradient along that whole thing to make it look natural. But I just used the eraser tool because it was easy, okay? But and then you know, you can just leave it as is or put it on multiply blend mode, okay? Now once my fork shadow was in, I paused and I said, well, you know what, I don't know if I need to put in any shadow from the food, because that little bit of a shadow just kind of did enough to kind of ground the whole scene, make it a little bit more realistic, all right? But I very easily could have put some shadows in there. And the way you do that, let me put a blank layer above this. Let's see if it will let me do this, all right? I'm just going to take a hard round brush, all right, with black. Yeah, see, it's not going to let me do it. It's not going to let me do it. It's making lines, and I don't know why. What you're going to do is just basically make blobs. Oh, it's okay. Let me see. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Let's see if it'll. Oh, I can do it with the control key. Oh, see, it's not going to let me do it. Okay. Make a blob kinda in some amorphous shape. All right. Go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. All right. And here we go. Here it is. All right. And then just manipulate the amount of blur for the type of shadow you want to create, okay? The further away something is that's casting a shadow, the softer that edge is going to be, all right? So about 40%, 40 pixels there looks good, all right? Hit OK. You can change the blend mode to multiply, all right? And you could even move that around if you need to. All right, so there we go. Oops. Move that around. Okay, but you can see that it kind of doesn't do anything. It kind of competes with the shadow of the fork. So that's why I decided not to add any more shadow, because I felt it would have just been too much. There we go. Would have been too much and kind of a bit of a overkill, and brought attention too much down, which I didn't want. Okay. But at this point, this is when I looked at my overall image, and I noticed, remember I said earlier, this shadow here, this is what it looked like before, all right, with no shadow, and it looks disjointed here, okay? It looks like it's just cookie cutter floating above a plate, all right? There was nothing to connect it. So I decided, even though it wasn't in the original composition, you know, from the actual light hitting the shell, I decided I was going to add it. So I created a shadow, and you know, you can adjust how much influence you want that shadow to have. Okay, and that was pretty much it for this particular composition. So you can see that all the tools that I used are tools that you already have in your knowledge base. I know you have them because we've gone over them in the past, all right? It's just, you know, knowing when to apply them, okay? Any questions on any of this?
Very nice, Doug, very nice.
See, oh my God. Doug, when you have all the layers, do you create like a stamp? Is it called stamp? Like
Okay. Yeah.
Like a stamp layer, so it blends everything, and then you can export it as a, you know, JPEG, TIFF, or whatever.
I can export it from here as is. All right, but I'm glad you brought that up, because it reminded me there is one more step that I will do just before sending it out. All right, and that is to do a sharpening, an overall sharpening on everything. All right, and I actually have an action for it. It's basically just a high pass sharpen. But in order for a high pass sharpen to work, you need to do a clone stamp layer of everything. So I'll go to the very, very top, Control Alt Shift E, Command Option E, Shift E for you Mac people. And what it's going to do is it's going to create it's going to flatten everything without destroying all your layers. All right, so it's a type of flattening, but it's going to preserve all your layers underneath it. All right, so you can see this is it. I can turn off all those layers below it, and nothing has changed. As soon as I turn that visibility off on that one layer, you can see that's it. Okay. And then on there, I'm going to apply a high pass sharpen. All right. And like I said, I just have an action for that. It allows me to select the amount of sharpening I want to do. So at this one, I got quite a bit of detail in there. So I'm going to go to about 4 pixel radius, hit OK. Now you notice that this layer it changes everything to this kind of like middle gray. And what it's using is contrast along the edges, all right, using dark and light to create a contrast along that gray in order to make those edges stand forward, all right? And it's going to change the blending mode to overlay. So basically what happens is anything that's middle gray becomes transparent. anything that is darker than middle gray gets darkened a little bit. Anything that's lighter than middle gray gets lightened. So because it's following those contour edges of everything, it's going to create that little bit of contrast just along those edges. All right, and it gives it the illusion of being sharpened. All right. Let me zoom in. Okay. Let me turn it off. Turn it on. I don't know if you can see it. You can definitely see it in the taco shell. All right. Can you see? Does that come across on the video? Yes, no, maybe? No,
Yes, it does.
no sharpening and sharpening.
No,
Okay.
you can see it, the little the chicken, the little
Yep.
chicken,
Yeah.
flying chicken.
Flying chicken.
Just
But a boom. Awesome. All right. So now at this point, I would call it done, and export it out and put it on a website, portfolio, social media, whatever you want. Okay. All right, guys. So that's it for this particular lesson. Let me stop the share. Go here. All right. So you can see tabletop. That's all I used. All right. Tabletop. Everything controlled. One light. That's all I used. One light. You guys can do this. All right. One light. Okay. Just, put a little bit of forethought. Make yourself a little diagram of what you want to do. All right. You can, chicken scratches is all you need. All right. Because you can refer to it. And what this does is it really kind of solidifies that mental image that you have as a working concept. That's all it does. All right. And it does wonders. Okay.
Did you use, what type of stuff did you use? Did you use 11 or 16? Do you know?
I use my 50 millimeter lens, and I was on not quite 8. I don't think. Where's my Lightroom? I was 6.3. So I kind of rushed this a little bit, trying to get everything ready for today. But yeah, F8 would be perfect. All right. The trick is not so much your depth of field, because if you notice, I kept everything. If we were to look at, if we look at the setup here, all right, everything was in line along a flat plane on this tabletop. Plate, taco shell, condiments. The only thing that wasn't in line was the cactus, which was pushed further back, but that wasn't part of, that's just added. All right. So all the food, if we were to take it and go 90 degrees, all that food is in one line. All right. So once you have your focus, as long as you throw everything up in the air along that plane, you're good. The key is having a fast enough burst of light to kind of freeze everything in midair. All right. So speed lights are awesome. Short T counts on monolights are awesome. All right, so I use my Godox. It's right up there. It's the QT 400, which it's designed to stop liquids in midair. All right. The trick is you have to put it on a very low setting. I think this is 1/32 of power. All right. So it's a very, very short burst. It'll freeze everything. You know, if you need to go up a little on your ISO, so be it. Okay, I'm actually at 100 ISO, 1/60th of a second on my shutter, and 6.3 on my aperture with my 50 millimeter lens. Okay, with a longer lens, you know, you might need to up the power a little bit on the light, or rather up the ISO on your camera setting. Okay. One way to do it is just do a test. Camera shutter trigger in one hand, something that you can toss up into the air in the other. Toss it, click it, take a look at it. You know, if there's a little bit of motion blur, it's not a big deal because this image is supposed to represent motion. So, you know, if there's motion in parts of it, that's not a deal breaker. You know, as a matter of fact, if everything is solid, sharp, suspended, it almost looks like fake. You know, it's bizarre. It's just how we interpret things. So, other questions? Was this helpful for you guys, seeing, you know, the process?
I always like to do one. You always mesmerized by the ones that they put things on top of it. And I always want to do one, but I was not confident. But I know with this, it's okay. It's just picture after picture after picture.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, Doc, I came in a little late, but I have to tell you, I'm very surprised how much I understood with your good teachings and step by step how to use this. Whenever I decided to use something like this, because this is way out of my realm. But you made it very interesting. So much I want to try it now.
Yeah, but honestly, it's not out of your realm. I mean, it is. All right, so one of the images that is fun to do, that kind of plays on this, is if you've ever seen the banana that's half peeled and you see that the banana is in slices, kind of like floating in midair, done the same exact way. All right, except, you know, you put a skewer through the banana and just kind of give a little bit of spacing on all the banana pieces, photograph it, and then mask it out with a little bit of Photoshop magic. You get rid of the skewer and you have a floating banana being sliced. You know,
That's a good idea for my next meeting. You know, I'll try something like that.
Yeah.
I'll do that. Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So for those of you who are in clubs and looking to do something that's going to gain you points on that next competition, all right, this is something that you can implement into your imagery. All right. Put something there, you know, whether you're photographing maybe get somebody in costume, all right, dressed up in a costume, and they're juggling something. Okay, you can put some kind of really bizarre something floating in the air that they're juggling. All right, they don't have to be actually physically juggling, because trying to capture that movement, you know, it's very fast. But you can fake it, so you know, you put them in a pose so it looks like they're juggling. They're looking up, they're juggling. Snap a picture, and then separately you photograph whatever it is that you want floating in the air. Clip it out, drop it in, add a little bit of drop shadow where it needs it, and you're solid. You know.
It never sounds so easy.
Photographer in our mentor group with Don, he's a musician on top of photographer, but he's busy. He makes more business as a musician, and he has an image where he is like throwing something, and then he has photographs of cars flying, coming towards you. So you have a car nearby, another one over here, another flying. So like very interesting. It was very unique.
Yeah, that's done the same way I did this. The exact same way. Absolutely. You know, it's just up to your imagination, you know, and that's why, you know, I suggest sketch it out, you know. When you sketch it out, it becomes less scary. It becomes more attainable. All right. And you saw what I did, you know, in Photoshop with this. Very simple masking techniques. Nothing heavy, crazy, heavy duty, nothing. All right. It's all skills you guys already have. So Alan, don't sell yourself short.
I didn't use Photoshop in my life yet, so you know, I'm a newbie still. But this has given me a great amount of encouragement to try, just jump into it.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. The issue I have is a resizing of the main of a. If I wanted to make that plate bigger.
Okay.
How could I do that in Photoshop?
All right. So
maybe a different time, but I mean that's one of the issues that I have with that resizing part. So let's say I change the background or do something along those lines, and my main subject is a little bit too big, too large, or too small, but I like the pose.
Right. There's a couple considerations to consider when you're resizing anything within your document in Photoshop. You can size down, no problem. It will recalculate and, you know, manipulate all the pixels into the small size. Where the issue comes in if you decide that, oh, you know what, I don't know if I want it that small, let me make it bigger. So now you took something this big and you size it down, let's say 50%. Okay? So you got rid of all those pixels. All right, those extra pixels, all right, you got rid of, well, if you scale down 50%, you got rid of 75% of your pixels in that scale down. Now you want to scale back up, okay? So you scale back up, now the computer has to figure out, oh, how do I fill in all these empty pixels that aren't there anymore, because now I have to take something that's this small and make it this big, you know, so it has to interpolate and things get muddy, okay? So one way to do it is, obviously, you know, if you can pre-plan and say, okay, I'm going to make it the size I need, that's fine. But if you know that you're going to be changing your size often within a composition until you finally get it right, turn it into a smart object, okay? So the way a smart object works, all right, let's take the example of the plate. All right, I'm not sure how big the plate's going to be in the final render. So I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to make it a smart object. Okay? So in my document, it's going to look like the plate, and it's going to have a little symbol that's saying it's a smart object. But behind the scenes, what Photoshop does is it creates another file, which is the full resolution of that plate, all right, and keeps it and holds it separate, all right? So now within the file you're manipulating, you can say, okay, I want to make it smaller. No problem. We have no issues making it smaller. The issue is when we want to make it bigger, okay? So now we say, oh, darn. Now that I've put in so much work, I realize I need it bigger. All right, so now you go to make it bigger, okay? Instead of trying to figure out what to fill in those empty spaces with, it's just going to go back to original full-size image that you had previously, and it's going to re-render to the bigger size, so you're not losing any data, because the original data is still reserved in that secret little file. Does that explain it? Hopefully?
That's smart object. Yeah, okay. Turning it into smart object.
Yeah.
That should do it. Okay.
Yeah. Just realize when you create smart objects, it's bloating your file, because it's, like I said, it's taking that full resolution image and saving it. All right.
That's right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. If you don't want bloated files, when you're finally finished, if you know you're not going to make any more changes, go ahead and rasterize it down, get rid of that smart file, smart layer, and you're good to go. But that's the workaround.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. Good episode. Hopefully you guys learned something. Yeah. All right.
Very good.
Next week is Q&A. So I don't care what you have a question on. It could be cameras. It could be lighting. It could be editing. Could be what's that?
Photoshop.
Photoshop. Yep. Lightroom. Anything. You know.
I plan to go right into Photoshop after this. In a half hour, I'm going to have something together.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Share it with us on the Facebook page. Yeah. All right. And then don't forget, if you're a Patreon member, you're going to be getting a notification from me about the three-tone guide to composition coming up the week after next. Okay? All righty. Thank you all for joining me for another awesome session of Learn Photography with Duck. I appreciate you guys like you won't believe. Have a safe one. We'll see you on the flip side.
Thank you, Doug.
All righty, dear.
Always a pleasure.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience, from the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.